Gentlemen, it's 10:01. We'd like to get started with our public hearing. This is a public information meeting. It is not a public hearing of the Board of Selectmen, but it's more to gather feelings, ideas, and positions on the issue of cannabis. Eventually, the question will be to the Board of Selectmen about establishing a referendum date for a vote. That's what we have discussed. There's been some discussion as well on the possibility of it not going to a referendum. And given the relative apathy, if you will, of the first two meetings, that was the result. But you can see we have a lot more people here today. We had 4 people our first meeting, we had 7 people the second meeting, and obviously we have good numbers today. We're approaching 20 people here, which is good. I ask that you not get into a debate if you're on one side or the other. We're interested in hearing what your personal feelings are relative to the town of Ridgfield, allowing a retail dispensary as well as cultivation and processing, and I think there are 9 other categories approximately that are involved with this question as approved by the state legislature. And they have made it an opt-in, opt-out choice, a local option, and that's why we're here today, to listen to what your thoughts are. I ask that you keep your comments to 3 plus or minus minutes. We're not going to set up a stopwatch, and you're not going to hear a buzzer go off or a bell, but just be appreciative and respectful of other people's time to speak as well. We can go around a second time. Before we do that, I will ask if there's anyone else that'd like to speak the first time. And hopefully we'll get some good information out of this hearing. I do have a copy here. It's a collection of articles and studies that have been done. There are pluses, there are minuses in here, there are pros, cons is what I mean. It's not intended to in any way take sides or offer an opinion. This was submitted, I found it on the filing cabinet outside of my office and gave it to our attorney to review, and he said it's an interesting collection of articles, surveys, etc. So I only offer this to you to collect some information, not necessarily to use it as forming an opinion, but as some additional information. I will ask either of our selectmen here today, Bob Hebert and Sean Conley, if they would like to add anything prior to starting the meeting.
I think you said everything that I would have said, Rudy. We're here to listen and get your input, and we appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is just to focus on really the issue at hand. So the state has made this available. People will be able to buy this in the state. That's not the question. It's really, should we allow these uses in Ridgefield specifically? And by the way, for those over the age of 21, that's what the law is. So
Good point.
We hear a lot about the kids, and that's a very big concern. But I think that the very specific issue is about selling and various uses in Ridgefield for those over 21.
Okay, so we'll open it up to the floor. Raise your hand to be recognized. We ask that you state your name and address, if you would, please. And we'll proceed with today's public information hearing. If we don't have answers for questions, or if someone in the audience doesn't have an answer, and I would yield to someone who knows more than I do about this, we'll get you the answer. We'll research it and get you the answer, but don't expect us, or me anyway, to have all the answers. So we'll open the floor. Anyone would like to comment? Yes, sir.
How are you, Rudy? Good morning.
Fine, Roger.
Okay.
Name and address, please, so everyone knows you.
My name is Roger Garbo. I am a longtime resident of Ridgefield. I've lived in Connecticut almost my entire life, born and raised here. And we raised 2 children in this town. We love Ridgefield. I am speaking in support of going to a referendum for the town. Let the townspeople decide on this issue. I think it's too important to let just the few passionate voices on either side sway the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not we do it. I think that it should be something that the entire town has a voice in, and that's why I'm speaking out in favor of doing that. I actually support having these businesses in town if they are properly run. We have a lot of liquor stores, wine shops, liquor establishments, and alcohol does far more damage than marijuana does to our communities, to individuals. No one's ever died from an overdose of marijuana, and you can just, the list of cost and lives lost to alcohol is countless over the years. And also prescription drugs too do far more damage. Personally, I know many people who use marijuana, cannabis products that have helped them get off harder drugs, prescription drugs. They tend to drink less, they tend to do other things less that were much more damaging. And it helps them, whether it's with anxiety or pain or whatever. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to talk about all the uses of it, but I have seen in my personal life with even family members how helpful it can be. And I think it should be easily accessible, and you shouldn't have to go to the state to get a medical marijuana card to go to a local facility to get it, because it's who wants to put their name on a list in the state that, hey, I need this, right? It should be private, it should be available to everyone. So I just hope that we can take this to a townwide referendum and let the voices of Ridgefield decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Melissa Terr, 27 Pheasant Lane. I literally want to echo every point he just made. You stole every one of my points. And I understand, Rudy, your concern about infrastructure. Like, if we do, as we know from, we pulled in from Reading, Weston, Easton. We are essentially their town. We're also a town to like South Salem, North Salem. So all of that traffic coming here is a concern for infrastructure. So it doesn't have to be on Main Street, we can put it out on Route 7, like, I understand those concerns, but echoing everything he just said, I can't really speak for other people, I can only speak for myself, but I tried to get 30 other parents of my age, I'm 45 years old, to come here today, and everyone's running around with children or out of town for the weekend. But I know that they feel the way we do, and just let us vote on it, let the town vote on it, and that's all. Everybody deserves a say in it. I do support it, but everyone deserves to vote on it, essentially. And same, I just agree that alcohol is far more damaging, as well as opioids. That's why it's legalizing. And to your point, that was in the Ridgefield Press this week, that federally, it's not okay. That's already in the House passed since that printing, right? And I don't know what's gonna happen in the Senate, but just wanna echo that point that you made, that by the time this actually were to happen in our little town, it probably will federally be okay. I shouldn't say probably, but we see the trend is all. So just to be mindful of that as well.
Thank you.
That's all.
Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Good morning, James Talon and Beechwood Lane in Ridgefield. A couple of things. I agree that it should go to a referendum and not be limited to a vote of the selectmen. I don't know if people in town have a concern that, continuing concern that marijuana is a gateway drug. My father was the chief of police in Danbury, and I've heard all those arguments. If you check with the CDC and the National Health Administration, there is very little evidence of that, if that is a concern to people. And as to the comment just referred to of yours that was quoted in the Ridgefield Press about contradictions with federal law, 18 states in the District of Columbia have legalized marijuana for recreational use, and 13 additional states have decriminalized it. And one does not see in research on the internet the federal government coming down on states or cities because of that. So I wonder if that's really a concern. And then finally, as the point was made earlier, there are liquor stores in Danbury and in Ridgefield. So the fact that there might be a dispensary in Danbury does not really, to me, is not really relevant to the question whether there ought to be one in Ridgefield. Thank you.
The contradiction that I was quoted in the paper on had to do with municipalities operate under federal law from a human resource perspective. So at the time that was discussed, the House hadn't voted at all. And in discussions with Human Resource, it's how do we enforce our employee requirements relative to police, fire, highway with the CDL and driving the trucks, if federal law was a no, but yet the states were. That's what the contradiction was that I was referring to. That's all. Thank you. Next? Yes.
Sean McAvoy, 150 High Ridge. I'm a Board of Ed member. I'm an advisor to the Prevention Council. Neither one of those are, I'm not speaking in official capacity on either one of those, but both of those do touch populations in town. First off, to the point that nobody's ever OD'd on pot, February 8th, 2022.
Died, I said died.
Died, overdosed, died. Bloomfield, Connecticut, February 8th. So start there. 2018,
I
76
just
OD
want
in Mill Park.
to, no back and forth,
Okay.
please. Thank you,
So
Sean.
yes, there was a death of a high school kid in Bloomfield, Connecticut,
Okay.
not 2 months ago. So it has happened, it will happen. 2 days ago, 10 kids at a middle school in Danbury with THC chocolate bars, Willy Wonka chocolate bar. These are the same kids that came to our school last week for a visit, same school, middle school. So this stuff finds its way to the kids, through the parents, obviously. But I start every regulation and law with one simple thing. If we didn't need the money, would we do it? And in most cases, like these, like gambling, the answer is probably not. But this town and this state has an insatiable appetite for revenue, despite the fact that we throw it all away every year and don't use it terribly effectively and have the highest taxes in the country. We still are always looking for more. So I ask you again, if we didn't need the revenue, would we do this?
Are you in favor of a referendum?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay,
I'm
thank
just
you.
giving an opinion.
Next? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Judith Pierpont. We live on West Mountain Road, and we're relatively new residents.
Can you speak up a little, please?
I will try, I'm very shy about doing this, and I would not be doing this except my husband is out of town and he told me to come here. So I hope you'll bear with me. We love young people. I've been a college professor in various parts of the world. Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me better
Yes.
now? I just would really want everyone to read more thoroughly about the impact of marijuana, especially on younger people's brains and the development of those brains and what happens with the neurotransmitters developing patterns of ultimately possibly schizophrenia and other kinds of bipolar issues. And it's very, very serious. And our wonderful Ridgfield Library, which my husband and I have come to use frequently and adore, prompted us to look into some of the books they have there that address the issues of marijuana usage and also touch on the differences between use of alcohol and use of marijuana. Whether you look at marijuana as a gateway drug or just something that someone's using. One of the issues is my husband and I are first boomers, early boomers because we're old, but marijuana then, for those of us, we never used it, or never have used it, but nor have our family members, but the issues of marijuana then, as perhaps boomers look at it, and the issues of the makeup of marijuana now are very, very different. Marijuana now, cannabis, is much stronger. The chemical composition of it is much different than it was in the 70s, late 60s, 70s. And again, my husband and I have lived all over the world. We've been exposed to cannabis at parties, all kinds of experiences that we've had. But the people who really get into trouble, and I know alcohol can be very bad, but it's this drug of cannabis and the impact it has on very young brains is something that's so serious, we really have to think very carefully about it. And one of the aspects of moving here to Ridgefield from a Chicago suburb, having moved there from London, we love Ridgefield. It's the most wonderful all-American town. And I just think that the values that I see expressed here by the individuals and the way people function with one another, within the community, with young people, with older people, is remarkable. It's an absolute, I'm taking too much time, I'm sorry. But we're so proud of Ridgefield, and I think a referendum probably would be a good idea. But I have to confess that because of all the reading my husband and I have done and everything we've been exposed to, we would hope that it would eliminate the possibility of having cannabis stores or outlets in this town.
Thank you.
I wish you'd been here, I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you, great. Anna Cockrell, 523 Ridgebury Road, and I am in favor of a referendum. People have already said this, people have already made the revenue points, but I just want to cite a couple of numbers. I know, the town of Great Barrington in Massachusetts, I think is an interesting case study. Forgive me if I'm repeating, I came a little late. That town, in 2 years since opening a dispensary, has made $6.7 million for the town in less than 2 years. Another thing I just want to mention, my husband and I actually invested in a cannabis company, not because we believe, everyone should be out there doing cannabis, or I have 2 young children, I absolutely do not believe that they should be partaking in cannabis, just like I don't believe they should be partaking in any controlled substance. But this company, if the headquarters is based in Colorado, they're going to be moving to Connecticut. In 2020, their total wholesale, not revenue, I'm not using these terms correctly, but it was something like they made $5 million in wholesale sales. And then in the last year, it's $47 million. So it's just, this is a huge business. And I also think it's an opportunity to regulate it. So I encourage anyone that's really, sort of suspicious of what's going on in a dispensary to go into one and to see how carefully regulated it is. So first of all, no one is wanting to sell marijuana to someone who's underage. No one is suggesting that. It's very regulated and controlled in the sense of, this is the amount, this is the effect that the cannabis would have, whether it's for sleeping or for anxiety or just for feeling more social. When it's legal, we can control it versus a bag of who knows what that's going around at a party. So for those 2 reasons, the revenue and I think the regulation, I am in support of this going to referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Go, John.
Thank you. Pardon me, I'm John Noonan. I live on 77 Sunset Lane, right here in town. Listening to what folks say here is interesting, but I always recall a doctor who was our pediatrician when our children were young. And the thing that he said to me that really has stuck in my mind, he said, medicine does not know fully what marijuana can do to your body. And to easily brush that off until I could see enough medical knowledge saying that it would not be harmful, I'm dead set against it. I think it's dynamite that we're playing with for our children. I think someone mentioned an entry drug. I think it is an entry drug. And people say, well, I've just had a bad time. I broke up with my girlfriend, my boyfriend, I flunked a test, whatever it might be. I wanted something to give me a little relief. And as I understand it, after a while, there isn't that much relief or as much as relief they would get when they would try it the first time. So what's the next step? You go to a stronger drug. And it was pointed out, marijuana today is different from what it was years ago. It's stronger. Now, if they don't get satisfied with that and they go to the next drug, that's what we all would be addiction of some form that just grows. And I think of addiction, it's frightening to me to think of people who become addicted because of this entry drug. And I think there is element to and truth to the fact that an entry drug or marijuana can be considered an entry drug. I don't think we can brush that off. And I think, because once addicted, and I've known people who have been addicted. For a young woman, What's the best way to make money when she's addicted? Prostitution. What's one of the other ways to make money is theft, and as a result of that, it's jail. I think when people are willing to play with dynamite, which I think this is, it is a major, major concern. I'll tell you a story about medical marijuana, by the way, I think is perfectly fine. You do give all sorts of strong medications as painkillers for people who have had operations and whatever, and they are in great pain. You use, not heroin, but I forget the other drugs that are used that way, that are addictive, but given in extreme tight control. I'll tell you a story about a stupid cousin of mine who, when she was into her 80s, she said to her sons, I want to try marijuana. She did. She had one dose, felt so sick that she wanted to be taken to the Danbury Hospital. Now, to me, that was an expression of stupidity on her part, and stupidity on the part of the people who gave her the medication, which I think were her sons. It was also mentioned that one of the main pushers for having marijuana, legalized marijuana, is money. If the damn politicians cannot mediate and take care of the debt of our state or whatever it might be, they go to something that they can spend more on instead of correcting the problem in the first place. And I've heard it said time and time again, it's money, and that's the big thing. The states or the federal government want more money so they can blow it. I just beg and hope that the town never allows the dispensing of marijuana in the town. I personally, if I knew the person who was having a store or a place that was selling marijuana, I would have nothing to do with them. Because I think that's, to me, that's scum. And as far as decriminalization, people say, well, if you could decriminalize the use of marijuana, one of the things that we have always learned, or I did as a young boy, is if you get a ticket for speeding, you pay a price. There's a fine. If you steal something, you go to jail. That's a penalty. And the same thing is if you decriminalize the marijuana, or the use of the marijuana, or sale of it, well then again, there's no penalty for doing it. I'm a great believer in the death penalty. You go out and kill people or do things like that, you pay the price. And if there's no price to pay for using marijuana or purchasing marijuana or selling marijuana, then I believe we have made a mistake, and I hope we are forthright enough not to have to go to a referendum to say, initially, I hope our board can say, we don't need that. We realize that it's not going to be any good for our society to introduce another drug into the society. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Rudy. Yes.
Can I make a quick comment? I just want to remind everyone that, first of all, marijuana is legal in the state. It is accessible. It's accessible in Danbury. So we can debate the merits or the negatives or pluses of marijuana and all the research that may or may not be available. But today's hearing or today's meeting is really about, do we want to have a retail distribution company in Ridgfield, or do we want to have the ability to license somebody to cultivate it. It's not about accessibility, it's not about the legality of it. We could be here all day, and there's a Fairfield Prep Ridgefield baseball game starting at noon, FYI. So if we can keep our comments to your views and opinions on the pluses or minuses of having a dispensary or a cultivation facility in town, that's really what this hearing is about.
Think about it.
I'm Linda Walker at Old Sid Road, and I concur with this gentleman here. Put it to a referendum.
Thank you.
How many have we seen in this town, I've only been here 22 years, have died, teenagers, from car accidents, from alcohol abuse? Versus how many have died from smoking a joint or doing a pipe or whatever? I don't think we have. We have more establishments here for alcohol on every block practically. So I don't see why we can't bring this to a referendum and let the citizens of this town decide to have it here, or have to go to Danbury and let them reap the benefits of the proceeds.
I'll go next. So I'm really not understanding the comparison.
Can I have a name, please?
Oh, sorry. My name's Luciana Shortell, and I live at 619 Danbury Road. I'm a mother, and I've lived here for 8 years. I'm really not understanding the comparison between alcohol and marijuana and how the logic of, we see issues with that, so let's introduce new issues into our town. I'm just gonna read my whole statement because I'm not really good off the cuff. So, it's becoming a common pattern here in Connecticut. Outside groups, entrepreneurs, and experts who stand to benefit financially from their recommendations coming into our towns, telling us what is best for our community. The reality is this proposal will fundamentally change the appeal of the community for the people who work hard to raise their families here. Ridgefield is a family-first town, and upholding the standard of living for families and children is our top priority. Proposals that threaten this cannot be entertained, regardless of their potential revenue generation, which I understand to be minuscule, even before weighing the opportunity costs. We keep hearing about a mental health crisis from our politicians locally and nationally. Indeed, it appears to be a pillar of the platform for candidates in 2022. So is this the best time to encourage substance dependency as a coping mechanism when many, especially our young people, are at their most vulnerable? And when fentanyl is now the #1 cause of deaths for Americans aged 18 to 45. Does everyone know that Danbury recently approved a dispensary? So what's the rush for Ridgefield? Not only is there a local resource for the area's newly discovered marijuana needs, we now have an opportunity to see the benefits and detriments it will have in Danbury. Meanwhile, Greenwich, New Canaan, and Westport have all banned recreational dispensaries, and Wilton, Norwalk, Trumbull, and Fairfield all have moratoriums in place. On March 3rd, CT Examiner articles stated, Norwalk residents have said they worry marijuana induces young people to try stronger drugs, and the city would be a marijuana magnet because surrounding towns have banned sales. We share these concerns. Let's be mindful about which towns and cities' trajectories we are trying to emulate here in Ridgefield. I'd also like to ask if we've asked the police commissioner or the Board of Ed to weigh in on this, because I think an open secret in Ridgefield is also that our middle schoolers are even introducing drugs into their lives and into the schools. Most of us have noticed the banner on Town Hall inquiring about our gambling problems. Will that banner eventually be replaced by one offering us addiction solutions? Because another pattern I've seen even more often is that the legislators and outside interests who create the problems in our towns are also the first ones with the expensive solutions when the consequences of poor decisions rear their ugly heads. Having known someone who is a recreational marijuana user for many years, I personally witnessed a bright, hardworking, personable, funny individual in his prime become passive, isolated, depressed, and wholly dependent on a substance just to function. It was a costly habit for him and his household, and it helped end his marriage. So let's think carefully before we decide to normalize drug use for residents, young and old, encourage dependency as a coping mechanism, and lay the foundation for addiction and managed decline here in Ridgefield. Please let the town's voice be heard on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And you are in agreement with the referendum?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth DeSalvo, 57 White Birch Road. I don't really have, as a grown-up person, I don't care if my grown-up friends smoke pot, it doesn't bother me. And, you know, I'm not against the sale of marijuana in general equal to alcohol, because I believe too, it would be more regulated and that would be better. But I don't think we should casually overlook the young people in our life, because I know, I grew up in the 70s. Many of my friends smoked pot at school all day long. And that's the difference between alcohol and marijuana. Young people, I know them still, they will, it's invisible, it's more invisible. Young folk don't go to high school and drink at 9 o'clock in the morning and spend their whole day drinking at school. That doesn't happen. But plenty of young people go to school and smoke marijuana all day. And it does have a huge effect on their brains, I believe that strongly. And so it's not about us grown-ups. Go ahead, smoke pot all day, who cares? But it's about the young folk and what it does to their lives. And I don't think that should be lightly, just tossed aside. Because, yeah, they might not be dying, but there might be many more of them who are sort of wrecking their lives in another way. And so I don't think that should be taken lightly at all. And I'm not against the sale of it at all, but I just think it should be noted that, yeah, it might become so normal in our world if there's a place to buy it right down the road, that kids start to think, oh, it's totally cool to smoke pot, it's no big deal. So, yes, I think there should totally be a referendum, and it's very complicated, that's all.
Thanks. Todd Zagorek, 9 Hawthorne Hill Road, up in the Ridgfield part of town. I came here because I was really curious to hear what people had to say, and I appreciate the comments, because I don't think that I've made up my mind on this. I want to be open-minded about it. I think a referendum is an excellent idea, because I think this is the kind of issue that people are perfectly capable of forming an opinion about and voting on. Having said that, I do find myself leaning against the idea of having a dispensary or dispensaries in town. The money is real, but I'm just not sure that it's worth the problems, and I think it's naive to think that we won't have problems. I worry about an increase in impaired driving. I worry about an increase in underage use. I understand that the substance is legal across the state and in many other states, and that we're going to have those problems to deal with whether we have a dispensary or not. But I can't help but think that communities that have a dispensary are probably going to see more of an increase than communities that don't. I hope that's not a huge increase. I hope that's only a slight difference, but nevertheless, I think it's naive to think we won't have more of an impaired driving problem and more underage use, and that really worries me. I'm just not sure that the money is worth it. I think the issue about the fact that it's still illegal under federal law is really an interesting issue that creates some interesting problems of its own. I understand the House of Representatives has passed it. I don't know that the votes are there in the Senate. As long as it's not legal under federal law, I don't see how dispensaries are going to get the insurance coverage that they need, or how they're going to get the banking services that they need. If anybody knows how that happens, I'd really be interested in hearing about it. Because I don't see how a bank is going to open a merchant account for a business that is illegal under federal law. I don't think bank examiners or bank auditors are going to permit that. And if that means that dispensaries have to operate on a cash-only basis, well, that's possible, but cash-only businesses have their own problems. They can be targets for robbery. They can be approached by organized crime groups who want to do money laundering. I'm not saying that would happen, but I'm saying that does happen more frequently with cash-only businesses than it does with other businesses. I don't know how dispensaries deal with that in other states. I really don't. Anyway, those are kind of my feelings on it. I want to have an open mind about it. Referendum's a great idea, but I'm not sure the money's worth the trouble.
Thank you.
Dave Goldenberg, Cethlo Mountain Road. I just first want to note that kid who died recently in Connecticut, which was tragic, died from marijuana laced with fentanyl. And my guess was that was not acquired at a dispensary, because there's a lot more regulation and control there. Anyway, I hear the concerns though, and I understand that there are risks. and I completely support a referendum, but I want us to be consistent and not hypocritical. So I'd like to propose that the referendum also include the sales of alcohol in town. Because alcohol, as we know, is at least as risky. I have relatives who, as many of you do, who have been addicted, who have died from alcohol use, kids who have died in alcohol use, and I'm sorry, I was not one of them, Elizabeth, but I know kids who were drunk all day in school. Those were in the days of Boone's Farm apple wine too, so they really went through a lot.
Can we keep it focused here, please?
Yes, I will. So my proposal is that we include prohibiting the sale of marijuana and alcohol, if we want to be consistent, within the borders of Ridgefield. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
Hi, Jeff Resnick, Stonecrest Road. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's already been said. I just want to come out in favor of a referendum. I think it's the appropriate way to reach a conclusion. And I also appreciate the gentleman on the committee's comment in between here to emphasize that this is about the sale, the approval of sale in town, and that the marijuana, cannabis products are already legal in the state. That's an important consideration because I think the conversation keeps circling back to the legality, and that's already settled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back in.
She's been very patient.
Thank you, sir. Hi, good morning. Enid Brenner, 11 Sandalwood Lane. I would be in favor of a referendum. Am I allowed to, personally, I would be against a dispensary in town. I work in the New York State courts. I'm a peace officer, I'm a court assistant, I'm in the courtroom, I'm in White Plains every day. I see people coming in. I know I'm sticking to the referendum. I'm against, I would be against it for what I've seen in my professional life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Sides, and I'm at Bloomer Road in Ridgefield. So I'm in favor of a referendum, and I am actually a psychologist, and I live my life every day in the world of mental health and child brain development and all of these important issues that I've heard echoed in the room. I think that I don't have a lot of ability to speak on where things are politically or legally, but I think one thing that really kind of came through when you were making your statement in between everything was the accessibility. I think this is about accessibility. This is about whether or not it's accessible in town and whether or not it needs to be accessible here versus 8 miles from here. And I think that that is what the issue is about. So, you know, I'm very concerned with it being so available to everyone so close to home. And I think Ridgefield is, I enjoy being here because I feel like it is a different kind of place. It does have a different kind of feeling. When I drive in from where I work, which is not this place, I can feel the difference when I get here, and I think that even just the idea that we don't have drive-through restaurants is kind of cool and interesting and different, and I think that there's a spirit behind that, and there's a spirit behind maintaining the place that we are, and I think this is highly related to the accessibility of different things in town, and I think if we have the opportunity as a town to share our voices, that's really important, so I'm in agreement with the referendum.
Thank you. Anyone else? Over here, and then Jeffrey, if you don't mind.
No. My name is Deborah Franciscini. I live at 72 Sparta Road. I have a personal, I'm not to speak as eloquently as many of you have, but I have a personal story to tell. My brother started smoking pot at a very young age. And today, went from pot to a stronger substance. And it went to like snorting opioids. And just snorting fentanyl. And he's had 9 lives. And if he was in a hospital in Massachusetts once, in ICU, and the doctor went by and said, I can't believe this effing guy is still alive. So I have a personal response to me. I would definitely vote no, so I'll make that very clear. And to me, the money in town, I don't think it'll ever get in the millions, because the amount of money the town gets isn't substantial enough to make that happen. I also think that people who have been in town in different states have had to fight against drugs that are illegal in the streets, and because they're less expensive. And the kids aren't going to pay $50 for it, or not more legally, if they can get it for $20 illegally. So I think there's always been a challenge to people who have big businesses around the country. But I just feel that I was the mom who would drug test my son when he got home from high school, like high school event or going out with his friends at night. I was the mom going to CVS and buying the drug test kits and making him pee in a cup because it was important to me to not raise a kid who was, addicted to drugs. So for me, I guess it felt sweet. So mine is more personal, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name is Tom Bradbury. I'm in 117 Peaceville Road, and I've been in Ridgfield for almost 39 years. I've never come to one of these meetings before. And listening to everybody, I think the decision to make or legalize marijuana, pot, has passed me by. I'm not going to try to debate that right now. But, in life, we get to where we are one step at a time. And this is another step for Ridgefield. I don't think we should take. I'm torn because I believe on voting on things. But if we can nip it in the bud, I don't trust the vote. Who's going to come out to vote, that is. I would rather not have a referendum. Just two practical things. One is exposing our children. And if any of you, I've worked in New York City for most of my life. And over the last 10 years or so, walking on the street and smelling pot being smoked by someone walking in front of me completely pisses me off. And I don't want that to happen here.
Thank you. Let's go around until everyone's had a chance to speak, please.
Hi, Jeffrey Morris, Ivy Hill Road. I'm also on the Economic and Community Development Commission. And I've been to the first two hearings, so I just want to bring up a few things that were raised in those discussions and just offer some clarity. I mean, last week there was a lot of talk about how much our police budget is going to have to increase because if we were to sell legal marijuana in Ridgefield, and I mean, just if you think about it logically, there's not going to be more policing because it's legal and you're not going out and arresting people. But I checked in Massachusetts, and I talked to one of the dispensaries there, and they were required. This one dispensary is required to pay $1 million a year in economic impact. But after 2 years, they've gotten all that money back because the town has said it hasn't caused any parking problems, it hasn't increased the police budget, and it hasn't, created any litter or anything like that. So they're getting that community impact money back. So, that was sort of a fee for opening this, and that's coming back. And then there was a discussion about the revenue, and a woman early on said the amount of tax revenue in Great Barrington, which was pretty significant. I hadn't known that. But the one dispensary the owner came to a ECDC meeting on this topic last summer, and I talked to her this week. They do $36 million in revenue and have 115 employees in their location in Lee. The Ridgefield will get 3% of that. I'm not saying it would be $36 million here, it may or may not be. So 3% of that revenue would come in tax money. And the other thing, a lot of people are talking about dispensaries, and a lot of people say on Main Street and all that. What this whole law is, it's cultivation, distribution, and dispensary. So, I mean, one, I'm in favor of a referendum, and we can decide whether, if we say yes to it all, it goes to planning and zoning can say, we're only going to allow cultivation, we're only going to allow distribution, we're only going to allow retail, we're going to allow all of it, and how it's going to be operated in that. And, if you're on the fence, I do encourage you to go. Lee, Massachusetts, Great Barrington, Massachusetts aren't that far away. They're less than 2 hours. These are beautiful dispensaries, and, upstanding citizens are going and patronizing them. And they're not like walking out and then like getting on the sidewalk and passing out and using needle. It's a whole different thing. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't negative consequences to marijuana, but I just want to make sure that people have the right picture in mind when we're talking about the legalization of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Anyone else?
really quick.
Okay.
So I'm Vivian Epson, I'm also on Stonecrest Road. I would encourage a referendum for this, as long as it's very clearly stated and the education is put out there as best as possible. I know it's incumbent on all of us to do our own research and education, but as long as there's as much information as possible. That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't need a microphone.
I don't want to discriminate.
My name is Wayne Flogel. I come to you as a parent of two high schoolers. We have a great town here, okay? I moved here 5.5 years ago. I enjoy looking at all of Jack Sanders' books, of all the pictures from the old time. There's meat, like butcher shops with people's name on it, that roads are named after them from our town from like, 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I look forward to that Facebook post in a couple of years when it said, this is the old picture of downtown. And then we have, it was a butcher last, or 1980, or 1970 it was a butcher shop. Today it's our dispensary. So I think of that aspect on it. Also, I don't think the tax dollars are going to be beneficial, or excuse me, they'd be beneficial, but I don't think it's enough to for our kids, for us to have that, to open that access for our children. And that's all I got. I think it's a bad idea. Referendum, I'm not at liberty to discuss that.
Wayne is our Republican registrar. So is there anyone else that would like to comment? Mr. Carr?
I'd like to come over and...
Sure.
I'm going to attempt to take a 20-minute documentary and capsulize it into 5 minutes.
That would be wonderful.
Yes. And if you want to see the 20-minute documentary, you can go to ridgfieldrecord.com/pot, and it addresses, I think, the issue that you're here to talk about. One of the key things, somebody's mentioned the federal substance, Schedule I substance. One of the things that does is it invokes something called 280E of the federal tax code. And that means that a distributor of marijuana or of cannabis cannot take most of the deductions that most businesses take. So as a result, they pay about 70% of their income in taxes, about 3.5 times what most businesses do. The result of that is that they can't invest back in their business, they can't hire employees that they might want to, they can't provide the benefits, they can't give back to the town. The other thing is that because of the cost that goes up because of the taxes and everything goes into it, it forces the customers back into the illegal market. So how bad is that, being pushed back into the illegal market? Well, at about the same time that, oops, this is upside down. At about the same time that Connecticut was passing this law legalizing cannabis, California was appropriating $100 million to bail out their legal cannabis business because it couldn't compete with the illegal cannabis business. So don't think that because you pass this, that illegal fentanyl-laced cannabis is going to go away, or that kids are not going to buy it because it actually is going to be cheaper. So why did the state go for this? I mean, if all of this was known at the time, it was because of the taxes. You're right. And those taxes, 66% of those taxes are in the form of excise taxes. Now, excise taxes are the second most regressive tax paid by Connecticut taxpayers. 22% of the taxes will be in the form of state sales tax. Only 11% of the taxes are in the form of the town's sales tax. So most of the money goes to Hartford. Very little of it stays here in Ridgefield. And so if you take kind of the market that we're in, look at the population, we might, best case that I could find, based on the Marijuana Project's numbers, we might get $1 million in 2028, maybe. Probably a lot less. That's 0.7% of what the taxation will be at that time. It's negligible. But that only takes into account the tax income side. It doesn't take into account the cost side. So, let's see. This is a study that was done by the Centennial Institute, which is part of the Colorado Christian University, and they documented $4.50 in economic and social costs for every dollar of taxes taken in. But remember, that dollar of taxes, we only keep 11 cents of that, while we get most of those costs. And a lot of those costs, those are the tangible costs. The intangible costs are really way beyond, and that's when you're talking about your children. In this, you'll hear from Meg Sanders, who spoke at the ECDC, and she did talk about the fact that you did have 115 employees. She also said, don't do it for the taxes. Believe that's accurate, isn't it? She said, do it for the development. At the next meeting, Mitch Ancona said, gee, I was really impressed with that number. I can't find 14 employees. And later in that same meeting, Sean Dowd said, we have a problem with, we don't have enough employees in town. Our restaurants can't find staff. So we don't have a problem of not enough jobs. Our problem is we don't have enough employees. Trying to staff one of those businesses would be very hard. I also attended a marijuana business conference that Hartford Business Journal put on. And there, you'll hear this if you go to watch the video, you'll hear Andrew Glassman talk about all the legal risks that are on top of the normal legal risks that this business faces. And you'll hear from an actual person who's in the business, a guy by the name of Patrick Johnson, who says that he gets slapped in the face every day trying to find a place that he can do business that will allow him, even if the landlord wants it, the bank will often say, no way. So it's not an easy business to be in many ways, and I don't think it's one that would be positive for Ridgefield. Okay, here's the question that Mr. Goldenberg raised, and it's one that everybody tries to, well, isn't this this is no worse than alcohol. But that's not really the question we're here to talk about today, is it? I mean, whether it's better or worse than alcohol. The question is accessibility that somebody brought up. And is it compatible with Ridgefield? You know, there are a lot of businesses that are legal that we don't have in Ridgefield, that we don't want in Ridgefield. And there's a law called Gresham's Law that good money drives out bad money. Well, good business drives out, or bad business drives out good business. So you think you're going to have an accretive increase of one cannabis business, but how many family businesses are going to say, I don't really want to be in the same shopping center with a cannabis business? And finally, you know, right now this genie in the bottle of a cannabis dispensary in Ridgefield seems benign, but once it's out, you can't put it back in. There's no going back. You can very easily turn a no to this to a yes, but it's impossible to turn a yes to a no. So this is the, Mr. Martini, you've been doing this job for 20 years. You have a great legacy, many great things that you've done on your watch that have come to Ridgefield. I guess the question that you have to ask yourself, is this what you want to be, your legacy to be? This will overshadow all those many great things. And you can't wash your hands of this by sending this to referendum. You know, give us cannabis, give us cannabis, give us Barabbas, give us Barabbas. In the end, you have a responsibility, and the people of Ridgefield trust you. And if they want to overrule an ordinance, they can go to petition for a referendum. So you can't deny them a referendum. Yeah, they still have the right to petition and have a referendum. But you have the absolute right to say, not if I can help it. And I think you have, I can see it's in your gut. And I think you know what's right here. And I hope you will take the confidence of your convictions and convince the other members of the Board of Selectmen to pass an ordinance to deny this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just one quick record, Rudy.
Yep.
The Bloomfield case was not fentanyl-laced pot. BPH released a study in February. They looked at 40 different overdoses, and 39 of them came back with no fentanyl in them. One came back as possible cross-contamination. It was in Plymouth, Connecticut. So it was not fentanyl-laced pot. It was just high levels of THC.
Yes, sir. You mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that you had a presentation that was a balanced, factual presentation. Why don't you post that as a PDF on the town website? Because there seems to be
I will.
a mix of facts
I
and
handed out a
fiction.
couple of copies today. I haven't read it completely. Bob had received a copy as well. I've given them to the board. If there's information in here, each person who reads it may have a different interpretation.
Good.
It's up to you, but at least it's some information. It's a compilation of a lot of different studies and articles, et cetera. And at the end of the day, Bob, I don't know how you feel, whether it weighs one way or the other.
But my point
we
is,
don't have anything.
if there is a referendum, then why not put out information that people can look at?
Great.
Yeah, but just understand that this was
I
a
get it.
compilation of information that's not endorsed, sanctioned by the.
Anyone.
By anyone.
You can
okay?
say that online.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Beebe, name and address, please.
Oh, 378 Main Street. I agree with this gentleman here. I think posting it and just saying we're not taking a side, read it on your own. But I would also put it on to a Facebook town page, not just the town website, because a lot of people do not know to go to the town website, believe it or not, to read certain documents. They automatically will go to social media to find their information. So you have a Town of Ridgefield Facebook page, I would definitely post it there.
How about the referendum? Thoughts?
Well, I haven't really well, my personal feeling is, I'm kind of like Deborah, I lost a sister to drug and alcohol. So I have a very personal feeling about this. I did attend an ECDC meeting last summer that Jeffrey held regarding this issue. I've been in California where my mother lived in the desert, where you have a beautiful facilities, multi-million-dollar facilities for distribution of cannabis and products. And you have seniors lying down the street at opening. You know, I mean, it's a big business. But my worry is, prior to these facilities opening, you could get legal marijuana in California through a doctor's prescription for patients who had cancer or severe pain issues. And I wonder, do we look at that enough as an alternate to having a storefront? Because there are studies that show that marijuana use will help to alleviate some of the pain receptors for severe illnesses, which my father had to access when he was dying of cancer. So I'm just wondering, you know, has there been enough of a balance looking at both sides? You know, storefront versus working with your doctor. I mean, I don't know what Connecticut's rules are as far as prescription of marijuana for pain issues or end-of-life issues. And I think that's something that's worthwhile looking at as a community. But, you know, my personal story is my personal story, like Deborah's is hers. Everybody has their own thing. My worry is, I agree with Deborah, why would somebody walk into a facility and buy $50 worth of pot when they can get it on the street for $20? And what you get on the street may be laced, which is what scares me more than anything. The fentanyl scares me a lot. I know you're controlled better when you're on a storefront because it's probably grown in a facility or in a warehouse or whatever. That's how it's being grown out in California. A lot of warehouse marijuana.
Referendum?
What?
Referendum?
Oh, the referendum? I kind of go along with Kirk, that let it be petitioned. If there's enough people in town that want it to go to referendum, they'll come forward. Have people get a petition signed on Main Street. I think the board putting forward a referendum, it's almost as if you're endorsing it.
So I'm gonna list you as a no.
Yes. No.
Correct.
So thank you for listening to me.
Someone in the back had their hand up? Yes, ma'am.
Bob Goodful.
Okay, Bob, go
Bob
ahead.
Downey, 57 White Birch Road. I don't know where we are exactly on the budget in the town, but if we have a referendum, can we do it on the same day so we get the greatest voter turnout? Is it possible to have schedule the two together so that it
I was
doesn't become a
hoping we
one
could.
issue?
The answer is no, both by statute and charter from the attorneys.
So it's,
So we
if
would
it
have to
becomes a
have-
referendum, it will be a single
It would be a
issue
standalone referendum that we would have to do
Focus on
probably
budget.
in the beginning of June. Or at the end of May, but probably at the beginning of June, before we hit the summer where a lot of people,
Well, before we
Two
do
now.
summer, probably better. I just feel that when we have a single issue referendum, you have the greatest impact by this single group. I was just hoping that it would be possible to do it when the most.
We did too,
important
as a
vote.
Board of Selectmen, we were hoping to put it on the budget referendum, but we cannot. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lady in the back?
Yes, once again, I'm sorry. I think I might have misunderstood the concept of referendum. After listening to people, again, Enid Credder, 11 Sandalwood Lane, I work in the New York courts. After listening to everyone, if there were a referendum, like as of now, I would vote no. Previously, when I stood up last night, I said I would vote yes, that there should be a referendum, but I'm voting no to the referendum, and if there is a referendum, I would vote no.
Okay, thank you.
I've changed my mind, we're 2 no's for the record.
Okay.
Didn't know what the choice.
Can I ask a question? Is this
In
even
the back?
vote? Is this even
Can you
vote?
stand, please?
Yeah, I just don't even understand the process of what's going on here.
It's not
When we speak, are we actually voting?
No,
No.
Okay.
it's just a
It's very
consensus.
confusing. Okay.
You know, the board will have to discuss it and determine which way to go.
I agree with many of the people who spoke here. I also don't, like I said before, don't understand any of these processes. I think I would be for anything that would limit the availability of keeping a dispensary or providing a dispensary time. So I don't know how that gets interpreted, but I just think it's a horrible idea for us.
Well, just to explain it a little bit, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to declare a moratorium for 1 year, which is into September. And they have asked the Board of Selectmen to consider this as a policy decision for the town. Yes or no, should we do it or not? If the people or the board were to say yes, then it would go back to Planning and Zoning to determine where, hours of operation, et cetera, from a zoning perspective. What part of our community should this be allowed in? And they will handle that whole issue. The Board of Selectmen is charged with the responsibility of establishing policy for the town. And the zoning commissioners felt this is a policy decision first, and then if it's yes, goes back to them. If it's no, it ends. As someone said, there is the right for people to bring forth a petition, signed, I forget how many signatures.
10% of the voters, 10% of
10% of the electorate and 17,000 voters, that's 1,700 signatures. That would be the process. Anyone else?
A question, actually, because there's been a lot of conjecture about revenue. So it's kind of a two-part question. I think the first is, does the town have control over, taxation percentages or, any fees that we would charge a dispensary? And are there any projections about revenue for the town? And maybe that's part of the information packet that you'll post, but I think that
Yeah,
would
the
just help
law,
make
I
the
believe,
decision.
anyone can correct me if they want to, is 3% of the revenues of the establishment of that entity.
And the town doesn't.
So if
have
it
any-
was $1 million a year, we would get $30,000.
But we can set, I believe the question is, can we set an additional or have an impact?
Right, so no, that's not, okay.
Massachusetts was, I think, different, where they
Yeah.
had
Different law.
agreed to almost an assessment of benefits,
Right.
That's what Jeffrey was saying before, right?
And then they determined that there were no additional costs, so the charges were, or the fees were suspended.
And that would be the case in Connecticut, it's the 3%.
Deborah?
People have a hard time hearing. So I just want to say one last thing. This morning I read that there's discussion about how much mold should be allowed in the growth of marijuana. And for me personally, if that is an issue, I don't feel that we should be ingesting mold. Like who would want to ingest mold? But apparently that seems to be a discussion about how much mold to allow in the growth of marijuana in the state. And that's going through the legislature now. Doctors are recommending their decisions on it. But I think that if that's the case, I don't know about the mold allotment in the growth of marijuana. That's kind of news to me. So I'm not sure if that's true or false. Jeffrey, do you know if it's true or false?
I don't know.
So that was in the paper today. I shared it on my Facebook page because I thought it was important enough. Because my family's lived in apartments with mold just because they don't have the money. And I just want to say one last thing, that unfortunately, my brother's choices led to even more bad choices. So he went from being homeless because he made choices to gamble, which is another law that just passed, time against. And he's been homeless several times because of it. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Are there any last, yes?
Rudy, just a quick thing. I just want to understand, any dispensary or any cannabis operation operating in town would not be selling to anyone under 21, correct?
That's the law.
Okay, because I'm hearing a lot about the kids, okay? I was a kid. I grew up in the 70s as well, and everybody had access to pot, and it was illegal back then. I don't think it's changed any different, and if pot is going to be out there, I'd rather it be not laced with fentanyl and have it controlled, and the dosage and the THC levels and everything is properly controlled on it, and instead of it being, you know, the wild, wild west. So, you know, I think it's another reason to have in town, if people are going to be getting it, get legit, legal, controlled.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Last one.
One last thing, this in a prior 11 Saddlewood, the CBD store that had been on Main Street, I know that was here for a while. They closed. I don't know if that was because maybe there wasn't enough interest in those kind of substances, I guess dispensed that way. So
It is closed, that's all I agree with you, it's closed,
yeah.
but why, I don't know.
And again, I think people are responsible, you know, to make their own choices, but I think it's a bad idea.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna, you know, I heard a lot of people say I changed my mind, and I was kind of writing down to get a consensus of where we're at, and I think your minds were changed by a couple of you on the basis that you didn't realize that the Board of Selectmen may have the ability to vote no versus sending it to a referendum. I'm going to check on the legality of that to be sure we can. I'm not 100% sure. Are you guys sure we can?
No, I just went by what we discussed.
So we will research that, but if the board could vote yes or no, those in favor, how many of you wanted to change your mind? Let me ask you that. 1, 2, 3, 4. That we not go to a referendum, that we keep it here. 5. Okay. Thank you all. Any other last minute comments? Thank you all for being here and taking
I just wanted, just one thing.
Can you stand up, please?
Yes, I'm Luciana. I just thought your point, and I'm sorry, I forget your name, but,
I don't think I told you who I was, but I'm Kurt Carr for the record.
just that,
Mr. Carr.
what you mentioned about how, the types of businesses and who want to be adjacent to that is really important because, I'm pretty connected to the community in Danbury too, and there has been, a fight over a homeless shelter that they want to make permanent there that was only supposed to be temporary, so much fallout and results from the pandemic. And there's a shop there that has always, there was a Dunkin' Donuts there, and there's also a sex shop there and a liquor store and a laundromat, but there was also a Dunkin' Donuts, and it was doing okay, but they didn't like what was happening as the result of the shelter. And once that business went away, they could not get anything there. And now the business that's there adjacent to the sex shop and the laundromat and the liquor store is a vape shop. So that's, you know, it says a lot about who wants to be neighbors and parts of certain strip malls and things like that. So, great point. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, thank you all very much. Really appreciate your input. Thank you for taking your Saturday morning. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.